Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Emoni. I appreciate having you here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing. We were tremendously fortunate to feature two of your remarkable pieces for our inaugural 2020 edition. And I've got to concede, while I was blown away by the pieces you allowed us to spotlight, I wasn't personally aware at the time just what a portfolio of remarkable work you had already had to your name.
Thank you.
And since I've become aware of your work, it seems I've seen your name spread up all over the place, from social media to traditional print media to announcements for community exhibits and shows. It's just like whack-a-mole everywhere I go. Uh,
Yeah. I-
so
I'm blessed for sure to be welcomed by the Sacramento community in such a way. So I'm really happy to be talking with you guys again.
that's awesome. Thank you. And more importantly for us, folks who read our inaugural issue pointed to your work specifically and told us it inspired them or caused them to reflect in some way. Not being hyperbolic there, that we got more feedback on your contributions to the 2020 edition than any other individual piece.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Last little bit of flattery I'll add is that when we learned that we were going to be able to showcase one of your pieces in sort of our first edition post our COVID induced 1 year hiatus, I was like, yes, because we received a couple of your submissions pretty early in the term. And from a superstitious perspective, it's kind of like a good luck charm. Like, okay, you know what? No matter what else happens, this term is going to be okay. We have a couple of their pieces.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Well, good omen. That's the whole brand. That's the whole idea of everything. So happy
We'll,
to deliver.
we'll touch on that too. Good. Thank you. But let's start with the basics, if you don't mind. Just tell me a bit about yourself. Are you originally from the Sacramento area? I heard maybe Midwest.
Yes. So a lot of my childhood was in Chicago. I moved to Sacramento at the age of around 12 or so. So I was probably like half and half where my life was. So I definitely have some of the Midwest Chicago influence, but Sacramento is a home for sure. It's home for sure. So.
Okay, great. And then is there sort of a pinpointable historical moment when your interest in art took shape? Is there something you can reflect back onto?
So my whole family is very creative. My dad growing up was an artist actually. He didn't have the opportunities to be able to pursue it the way that I have. But growing up and having like these very beautifully detailed drawings, I don't know that I could say that I thought of art as a passion always, but I always had an interest in it. Ever since my dad like gifted me this really beautiful drawing of the two of us when I was a child. I still have it. And I think that was kind of my motivation to get into like portraiture and realism and stuff like that. Just kind of like living up to that. It's always just been really cool and inspiring to me.
Yeah. And are there sort of themes and ideas that you yourself find yourself circling back to in your own work?
Oh, absolutely. It's always about identity. I mean, that's kind of the big umbrella of it. But, to kind of understand your own identity, there's so much reflection and healing that needs to take place to, figure out who you are underneath all of the things that you've been taught. And that is a lot of what my more matured work has started to focus on. I always explored my identity, but I'd say within the last couple years or so, it's a lot more about who I want to be rather than who society has told me I've been or who I've grown up thinking that I was. So I'd say those tend to be the themes that I'm exploring most of the time.
I love that. In between that pinpointable historical moment and the past couple of years,
Yeah.
did you have academic mentors?
I would say that one of the moments that got me serious about art, I don't even know if you could say it was a moment, but in high school, I went to Folsom High. I had a phenomenal art teacher named Jeffrey Carter, and he really believed in me and really pushed me. He was someone that inspired my talent, like my desire to develop the talents that I had. He really just pushed me to continue growing and like thinking outside of the box and just taking my craft seriously. And I think his kind of mentorship in a way allowed me to think that I could really take it seriously, that it could actually get me places, that it was something I was actually good at and not just something that I had fun doing.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, your hobby has taken you seriously. We'll get into how successful So what did you do after high school?
After high school, I went to Folsom Lake College. I changed my major a whole bunch of times. I initially wanted to go into art, but you know how kind of like society treats those creative pursuits. And also growing up in Folsom, it's much more traditional community, I would say. So even though people always encouraged me to follow art in a way, there was always that like, okay, but what do you actually want to do type
Oh,
of conversation. So there was a lot of like internal struggle when I was in college, like my first couple years of college, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that. I ended up only going to Folsom Lake College for a year or two, and then I stepped out to just start working because I wasn't feeling inspired by any of the directions that I was going. School didn't feel like me. And then right before COVID, so this spring semester of 2020, I went back to ARC to continue pursuing art. Um, Obviously, the pandemic hit, and that kind of was a wake up call for me. I kind of went through my little spiritual awakening, or I'll say my self realization. And that really inspired a lot of the direction that my art goes, of that like breaking down of my own identity. But then it also kind of led me to like, wow, I'm just going to make the jump. I'm just going to take the leap and go into this and figure it out along the way, So that's kind of what happened post high school. Is a kind of a crazy long journey, but we circled back. We made it.
that's fantastic. I recognize that the term emerging artist has been now attached to your name for a couple of years, and I think it's time to declare you've emerged.
Oh,
But
thank you.
But seemingly, as I mentioned before, it's been a wonderful couple of years for you. And Sacramento Magazine, in their February 2022 edition, highlighted some of the exhibits and shows you've been in recently.
Mhm.
And we'll actually post a link to that article alongside this conversation. But I was hoping that you could tell me a bit about some of your recent showcases, including starting with the inclusion of going back a little bit of two of your pieces, paintings, in a large outdoor exhibit in Sacramento near the Golden One Center. And for listeners not from the region, this is sort of a mall plaza area where the Sacramento Kings play and also host some of the larger musicians. So I was hoping you could tell me about this past year or two professionally for you, because you have been able to enter the professional world of the arts, which is awesome.
Yeah. So I'd say that the golden one opportunity that I had was probably the starting point. That was definitely the like in my career, the little switch that was like, oh wow, this is real. Like this is really happening. I was approached by a local curator named Faith J. McKinney. It was for Black History Month. She reached out to me and she had a couple of projects. We were working with a company called Unseen Heroes for a Made with Melanin campaign. And so I was commissioned to create a piece, one of the very large pieces that were displayed at the Golden One Center was called Intuition. To kind of describe it for some of the viewers, it is this not quite a silhouette because there's some details with the silhouetted Black woman with some fun patterns and this giant orb behind her. And that was kind of my way of, just, and I called it intuition because it was just a piece that came to me really intuitively. I didn't have to think about it too hard. It just kind of came out of me that way. But I really wanted to, do something that wasn't about the struggle of Blackhood, that especially during 2020. And I would say literally all of American history, but from 2016 to 2020, especially with all of the huge discussions about police brutality and all of the BLM movements that were happening in 2020 alongside the pandemic. I got very tired of the narrative of, the Black struggle being something that was for everyone's viewing pleasure. And so I created that piece, Intuition, just be like, look, at Black is just beautiful, like it's just inherently a part of human nature. We don't need to talk about the struggles. Not everyone experiences them. They're very real. I never want to say they're not real. I've experienced them myself, but I was just tired of that narrative and making it such a focal point. And I did not want my career to start taking off on such a negative connotation of my people. Like I did not want to do that at all. So I decided to make something a little more simple and just like elegant and beautiful that didn't have to talk about these heavy topics that we are all getting so overwhelmed with. Um, and the second piece that I had made was called Digital Dilemma. I watched a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it or seen
My
it.
advanced writing class, my argumentation class. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It just blew my mind. And so the piece Digital Dilemma, again, for the viewers that haven't seen it yet, it is a portrait of this woman with lots of this kind of glitchy collage situation behind her. I tried to personify the algorithm, essentially. You know, I wanted to use a Black figure to talk about something larger than race as well, and kind of, you know, touch on just the personhood rather than the Blackhood of it. But then again, making that social commentary of the fact that we are written in code essentially. And I just thought it was so disturbing and kind of freaky, but also just such a, you know, beautiful, and I say beautiful with in a more conceptual way, this beautiful realization of how society has just changed. It's just the way that the times are is, you know, there's a real version of ourselves and there's a digital version of ourselves as well. And so I thought that was a really fun piece to include for that that Black History Month thing at the Golden Arena.
You pulled it off quite well. I can see
Thank
that.
you.
I just rewatched that documentary this term, being back on ground in person, and I can see that association now that you mentioned that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you see it. I'm glad you see it. Yeah. But that was definitely the turning point for me. And I was really happy to be able to have those pieces, you know, be my introduction to Sacramento.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to put that. And then was there something before the Good Omen? I want to get to the Good Omen show in December, but how did the year continue for you last year?
So, oh wow, it was quite the journey. Where do I even begin with that?
Sorry, that was
So I so of course, like after I did the Made with Melanin campaign and I got my work up at the Golden One Center, um, I will say too, for any other artists listening out there, you get a big opportunity and expect them to start pouring in. That was not the case. It was not the case. There was a lot of work and grit that was required in between that and when I got my solo show. And it required a lot of connecting with the right people in Sacramento. I was super, super lucky, super blessed to be able to connect with people that saw my vision and wanted to support me. I do want to give a special shout out to Abe Spera, who owns Dwell Point, which is a studio in downtown Sacramento. It's basically an artist collective, and he really, really believed in me, and he presented me with a lot of different opportunities. I took them where I could. You know, saying yes to everything that came my way was really what I would say was the ticket for me. A lot of little things here and there. I did some markets during the summer. I worked at the This 916 block parties. I had my first
2 nights ago again.
yeah. I did that.
You did that last year? Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I did that one last year for one of the first block parties. I had a little vendor situation, and that was a huge introduction to Sacramento as well. I believe it was the first block party of the summer. So lots of traffic. I got to connect with some wonderful people. I really got my name out there. I spread my work around. I sold a lot of work, and that was a huge building point for me as an artist as well. And then sorry, what was that?
I just said that is so cool. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. And wow, I'm trying to like think of all of the things.
I know less about visual art, but I'm being honest when I say your pieces have been spoken about so highly. So maybe I'm geeking out at times. That's my question. So
well, thank you. No. I love being able to talk about my work, and I would say that that's a really big part of my success as well. Is a lot of my work is very intentional, and I know how visual art is. The average person will walk through a gallery, look at something for 10, maybe 15 seconds, maybe ask a question if you're lucky, but for the most part, just be on their way. And every time someone's asked me a question, I always have an answer for why I made something, like what all the little symbols are and like what they mean and how they tie into the overall narrative. I do a lot of portraiture, which is, I would say, kind of a difficult way of making art to make it seem deep, because it's just a picture of a person essentially. And so I do incorporate a lot of symbolism. I make a lot of intentional choices because I don't want it to just be like, oh, here's a pretty picture of a person. I always want it to be, something that can touch deeper. And so those conversations that I've had with people have been really influential and helpful in my career as well, I'd say.
And I mean, just thinking about the piece you were mentioning in reference, and can you tell me the title of that piece again in reference to the social dilemma, the one that helped inspire that moment? What was
Yeah,
that?
so I called that one Digital Dilemma. Had
Digital
to keep
dilemma.
the dilemma in there just as the little ode.
Picture
Yeah.
that, even though visual media is the thing that I have the least experience with compared to some of the other things that we're featuring, like creative prose, I know precisely what you mean. I can, even when speaking with my students, they can sort of look at your pieces and say, I think I know what she's doing here. And they might be wrong, but they're talking about it, or I think I see
Yeah.
what she was doing here and why she's doing this. And it's really fascinating. So,
Yeah,
and even when a piece comes intuitively to you, I imagine then the symbolism still sort of starts to spiral out from that initial intuition.
Oh, absolutely. I would say that, I was kind of mentioning how during 2020, I came to this self realization that which sparked my spiritual awakening. And that I don't know that the piece is in the magazine. I don't think so, but it's one of my most well known pieces. It's called Honesty. I created that piece intuitively in a matter of about 3 days. And I tend to sit with my work a lot. I will paint for an hour or two and I will just sit and look at it like I'm watching TV for a long, long time. And I will use it as a means of reflection of my own psyche. And I think that's something I advise every artist to do, that really dig into the things that you create when you're just in flow and you're not thinking about it, because it's always telling you something about yourself. And the fact that you say that your students look at it and they can say, oh, I think she's doing this, or maybe X, Y, and Z. And, I think another part of being an artist is I always have my meanings, but the fact that I can make something where other people can see that there's a meaning and then they can dig in, and then it's always a representation of their own psyche. It's always just so much fun.
That's awesome. And for our listeners, even though we only have a few of their pieces, they've kindly provided us a link to their Instagram and their website, and we will be posting that alongside both this interview and those pieces. So some of the ones that they're referencing here right now, you can actually go and find those on the website, because I think I've seen quite a few of them up there. And Honesty is available there as well for folks to see, right?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about that. Your debut art show, Good Omen,
Yeah.
exhibited last December. From what I understand, you showcased 42 original works spanning acrylic, graphite, colored pencil.
Yes. So I don't know that there was much graphite, but there was acrylic paints, there was colored pencil, as you said, and then also digital works and some ink as well. And the Good Omen show. So to kind of like give the crazy backstory of Good Omen, this identity that I've taken on in the most like humble of ways. I was the kind of story behind it. I was hiking one day. I like to hike by myself quite often just to like reflect and get into my own head. And I was going to the forest and I just needed an answer. I didn't even know what the question was, but I was looking for something. I felt like I was missing something. There was just a part of myself that wasn't sitting right with me, and not in a bad way, but just in a kind of confused way. And I'm like, oh, I got to figure this out. And I was in the forest for hours and hours, just sitting and waiting. And eventually I gave up and I was walking back up the trail and it was super windy. And I remembered thinking in my head, like, oh, I kind of like, I'm moving like a snake. And right now I feel like I'm a snake chasing a white rabbit. And in my head, that was like, this, I felt like a predator on the prowl for this, this sense of identity, this piece of innocence in myself that I was looking for. And I was like, oh, white rabbits, like they're good omens. Like, that's so funny that that was just the symbol that came up to me. And I rounded the corner, and in the middle of a trail, there was a white rabbit. just sitting there looking at me. And it gave me chill. It still gives me chills every time I tell the story, because when do you see white rabbits in the wild? You know, that was just super aligned. And, you know, the synchronicity of it all, synchronicity, however you say that word, it sparked something in me. And I was like, that's a good omen. And I feel like that's who I want to be. That's who I want to be, is just a good omen for people. You know, I want, you know, my art with people reflecting with it and everything, you know, even though self-reflection and introspection can be really startling and unsettling for a lot of people. I'd say the most of us, if not all of us, it can be really unsettling at times, but it's always a good thing. You know, it's always something that's letting you know you're on the way to something better, a better version of yourself, a better embodiment of your true desires, of the life that you want to live. And I've been, you know, really blessed and in the most humble of ways to be able to like feel like that identity just came to me, like I was gifted with it. And so that was a lot of what the Good Omen show was about. I was putting all of my, pretty much the totality of my work since my artistry. I really wanted it to capture my evolution as a human being and as an artist, how things ebbed and flowed. I had work all the way from my high school years where this subject, it was always portraiture, but the subjects were white women. And that was not intentional as a little high schooler. I wasn't thinking about it. But to see the focus there and to know that in high school, I had these feelings of not fitting in and of always feeling a little bit like other. And then as the show progresses, there's also this focus on Black womanhood as well. And also, you know, a part of this breaking down of my own identity is releasing the narrative that, you know, a Black womanhood, quote unquote, has placed on me, the limitations that I've placed on myself because society has told me that they're there. And then another section of the show being about the topic of femininity. You know, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be feminine, to embody that energy, to be born, you know, female, and all of those things? And what limitation has that identity placed me in? And the last section of the show is focusing much more on spirituality and just the human essence of me, and how, you know, all of it tied together is like, yes, we're all human, and that is the essence of who we are. And any art that I make is inherently Black. It's inherently about femininity because those are core parts of me. But I'm also more than that. And it's, I think maybe it's a strange perspective that people would think of humanness as more than just being female, or, you know, identifying as female, or, you know, being a Black person. But I think the humanity, it's so much larger. It's so much more all encompassing. It creates much more space for compassion and for empathy. And so I try to break down, you know, in a lot of my recent work that is more spiritual, I try to make androgynous figures. I try to make figures that are racially ambiguous. You can't see it right now, and I'm sure the listeners definitely can't, but I've got big, giant, curly hair, and making all of my figures bald, like this thing that has defined me for so much of my life, and now trying to create portraiture that is an essence of me with the most like definable features of mine removed. And still trying to understand and like empathize with the likeness and the situation of these characters that I've created. And I always invite people to try and step into those characters themselves to be able to reflect and, again, empathize and have compassion with the images that they're seeing. So the Good Omen show is just fantastic. And a lot of love from the Sacramento community.
From a practical perspective, how was it? Were you anxious? There's this great vulnerability to doing this. It's also your first, you know, how was it? How was the reception? How did you feel going into it? Some of those elements as well.
Going into it, I was motivated. I just had a fire under my butt. Was there nervousness? Absolutely. But I think it was more nervous for the sake of being nervous. I was ready for a solo show. You know, I was just ready to show who I was. I was ready to out in the world again and let everybody know I'm Emoni and this is who I am. This is what I have to show for. And so it was nerve-wracking, but I think that I was actually seeking the ability to be that vulnerable with people. So it didn't scare me as much as it excited me, and the ways that I was able to connect with the people that came through. Everyone was so accepting and so welcoming. And I had a ton of beautiful and reflective conversations with people. The amount of people that like were able to realize things about themselves in their conversations with me, things that they had never like recognized about themselves like alone individually. It was really, really beautiful to be able to share those moments with people. I feel like the show did exactly what it was supposed to do, exactly what I wanted it to do. So yeah, very nervous, very scary. We put the whole thing together in a matter of like 3 weeks, I think. Lots of long, long days. I ended up hanging a lot of the show by myself. I do want to give another shout out to my friend Max Barrett, who helped me so, so much throughout the entire process, just helped make it happen, helped get the invites out. So yeah, it was a lot of work and it was nerve-wracking, but I think that another success point of mine is that I've always been like, we're just going to figure it out. We're going to do it. It's going to happen how it happens. And it happened exactly how I needed it to. So
some people will be listening to this and they consider themselves creatives, or they are creatives, I should say, and they might want some advice. And you've mentioned a few different things. You've mentioned, after the Golden One pieces that were featured, that there wasn't this immediate blow up, but there are lulls. You've mentioned going out into nature to sort of find something. You don't even know what something is. Um, Whether it's sort of creative blockages, and as a writer, I can completely understand those,
yeah.
writers, or getting your foot in the door, or whatever it is. What sort of advice do you have for other creatives that are emerging as you are and will hopefully emerge into a very public sphere soon?
I would say as you're starting, just say yes to everything, and not everything if it's going to be, compromising your integrity, of course, but just remaining open to all of the opportunities that come your way. And I'd say above all else, like trust yourself, trust your vision. If there is a point where you're doubting your vision, that's when I would say go into nature, go into something that's going to center you, go into something that's going to help you just feel realigned with your purpose. Because I think a lot of people will get stuck with the idea that like, oh, people don't care, people don't want to listen. But I think that everybody's gifted with their creative talents because they're meant to be shared. And even if it's just one person or two people, and hint, it's always going to be more than that. But everybody's perspective, everybody's contribution like deserves to be seen. There's always going to be people out there that like need you to be a little catalyst for them in some type of way, whether you inspire them, whether you help them feel related to, whether they can feel validated by your existence, your experiences, what you have to say. I think it's just always going to be a matter of trusting that what you have to say and what you have to contribute is going to be worth something. It's going to be worth something to someone. And that's, I think, the most empowering thing that an artist can hold on to, knowing that, of course, being creative is self-expression. It does fulfill something for the artists themselves, but it is, from my perspective, a service to the world to be able to contribute those things. So if you're not doing it for you, sometimes you can just do it for other people when it gets scary. So that would be my advice, I guess.
What's next for you?
What's next? Well, I actually just moved to LA at the beginning of this month. I honestly have put a little bit of a pause on fine art for now. I am currently working for a creative agency in LA, and they do a lot of visuals for the music industry. And so right now, what I'm hoping to do, music was my first love. And I think that music has been a really important part of my creative practice. I think a lot of creatives probably feel that way. But now I'm trying to see how I can contribute my creative visions and my creative talents to this other form of creative media that gets taken in a very different way, and see if I can I want to be able to elevate those experiences, and to be at the intersection of art and music is just like, it's a lot more where I want to be. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm not even opposed to ever getting back into fine art, but as you said, like as a creative, we get into blocks and things. And I think the phase of my life that I'm in currently is I'm gathering more inspiration. I'm building again. I made a ton of work. I showed it out. It's still being shown throughout Sacramento right now. And now I'm just ready to regather the inspiration and live my life a little bit, and I'll be back. But right now we're in the living life era more than the reflecting and digging era.
I wasn't planning on asking this question and actually that's a strong ending point, that what you just said. But at the same time, who or what are some of the musicians and or bands that have inspired you, either as a performer, or in the work that you're doing now? What type of music, or is it genre bending, or what do you?
Oh gosh, it's a lot of different music. I would say there's a band called Krongbin, and they do, I don't even know what to call it. Like, it's like almost funky, kind of ambient, but there's lyrics involved sometimes. I don't know. It's really beautiful music. It's the type of music I like to listen to when I'm walking through the forest. It's just funky and fun, but in a reflective way. I really like their music. I keep them on in the background. I'm creating all the time. I would also say a lot of like, I like alternative music a lot. Spoon has been a big one, Arcade Fire, The Neighborhood. A lot of their lyrics are just super, I don't know, just relatable in a way. And I like music that just gets me in touch with myself, that I feel like I can relate to on a personal level. And yeah, and I would also say, to special shout out to Kendrick Lamar as well. I would say within the rap genre, he is absolutely my favorite. His most recent work just now, oh, the inspiration that I have, the visuals in my head that I've created, have not executed them yet, but the way that those stories, the storytelling just inspires me to create. I would say music like that is probably
That's
what really gets me
fantastic, and I
going.
agree completely. And listeners, I'm not promoting Kendrick, but Kendrick is on tour this summer, including at Golden One.
Yep, he is.
Gotta come back home to check out. Well, I'm sure. Well, I know he'll be down there actually, but that's
I'll go to multiple. I won't mind. I love him.
awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you very much for your time and for your pieces, both in the print and web edition. I'm really grateful. And it looks like they've asked me to be the faculty advisor for the spring 2023 edition. So unless you are too big to remember, well, you probably get that joke too frequently. We'll be honored to feature your work in the future as well, if it is right for you at that time, is how I should put it. And I just wanted to thank you for your time tonight. So,
Yeah, well, thank you so much, David. Again, I'm just so happy to be here. I love always touching back down to my roots and being able to contribute. So I'm so glad I got to be in this issue the second time around.
awesome. Thank you.